The following program and contents, including the views and opinions expressed by the host and any guest speakers, are solely for informational and entertainment purposes. The views and opinions expressed are not endorsed or supported by Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, their employees, affiliates, or advertisers. The host and guest speakers are solely responsible for their own perspectives, and their views do not reflect those of Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, their employees, affiliates, or advertisers. The information provided in this program should not be considered as professional advice or as a substitute for professional consultation. Listeners and viewers are encouraged to form their own opinions and seek independent advice when necessary. Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, their employees, affiliates, and advertisers hereby disclaim any liability for any claims, damages, or losses incurred as a result of the information presented in this program.
Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Mission Evolution is coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network and X Zone TV on Simul TV Channel 32 from our broadcast studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. This hour will redefine belief from a new perspective. New information indicates that there's more to belief in manifestation than first meets the eye. What is belief? Can engaging belief empower us to manifest? Does it matter what we believe in? With us this hour to take a deeper look at belief and manifestation is Epoch Work Founder Dean Wilkinson. His website, epochwork.com. Dean, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you, Gwilda. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I really look forward to this topic. I think it's a really good one right now. The more we're personally empowered, the better. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Dean?
Well, I'm an explorer at heart, right? So, and I've been in the blue collar trades world most of my life, grew up in it and worked in it most of my life, and ended up building some businesses and working with blue collar men and women, and seeing the effect that beliefs had not only on them but on me, and how it determined what we manifested in the world. So I've been on that journey, and it's taken me through Christianity to everything, shamanism to every possible spiritual path, right? I've examined, and along the way, of course, my beliefs have evolved and changed throughout that, and it's just I think that's for the rest of my life. I'm going to be on this belief journey. What is it I believe, and how does it all come together to help manifest the reality I want?
So you state most problems in the world stem from misunderstandings about what God is. That's a pretty strong statement. Would you please explain?
Certainly. The big questions, who we are, what are we here to do? Why are we here? Those are the big questions of every person that I've talked to and been in contact with, either through their books, their podcasts, or their content. And it is the question: what has happened in my world, in my reality, is I was starting to notice things coming through Christianity, seeing, well, hey, that's a certain belief. You're told what to believe about God and where you came from, and you adopt that, but then you actually try to put it into practice in your life, and it doesn't necessarily work. So when we look at a society that has been told everything from there is no God to the God is the Christian God or the judgmental God or the one that's going to send you to heaven or hell, it doesn't work. And that's why the discord and the dissonance is inside of each individual, right? And that as we see it expressing in the world where no one is sure. So when we have confidence, because beliefs drive all of our behavior, when we have a belief system that works from where we were before this life, what we're doing in this one, and what's going on for the next one, then we have a sense of, oh, we can maybe open up to a benevolent being, a benevolent source of our creator. And we can walk more peacefully, more confidently into our life and create the things that we want. So I think the dissonance that comes from not knowing what we believe and having all these different sources telling us what to believe, we probably haven't worked it out ourselves into a belief system that makes sense for us to make sense of the world.
So it sounds like it's kind of a moving target.
I would say,
Belief.
Yeah, belief it needs to be, right? We need to be open to all possibilities, in my opinion, right? Open to all possibilities of what this word God means, or the word light or energy or source or creator. What does that mean? Because no word is going to describe it for us. So we got to stay open to a fuller understanding, in my opinion, and open up to all possibilities and say, what makes sense here about the way this life is, about what we see. There's the things we say go wrong in life, and the things that we say go good in life or right in life, and seeing what are the causes of those, and realizing ultimately, I think we're all going to realize that it's within us and how we interpret all those bigger questions in life.
So it seems like if we're really hooked into belief, particularly the traditional belief, we're kind of in a victim stance. The higher source is what dictates what happens to us. And where does the empowerment of the individual come in with that? In that, how can we reframe it a little so that we have some control over our lives?
So it depends on your background, like who I'm talking to. But if I'm talking to someone with my background, the Christian background, and most of the Western world is steeped in that Christian tradition. It's even if you don't participate in it. The idea that, I forgot your question. Would you just repeat that part again?
I was a little long-winded with it. So my question is, how can we prevent ourselves while we're buying into a belief system or creating a belief system to not fall to victim of what's going to happen to us based on the higher source versus being personally empowered?
So the way I did it is, as I explored all these areas. I first in depth explored the Bible and Jesus and both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and looked at, hold on a minute, life as we value it in today's society wasn't valued the same. They would go and armies would go and wipe out, all men, women, and children in a town that they were conquering, and it didn't seem to matter. And the stories in there, about somebody comes into camp on their menstrual cycle, and then he opens up the earth and kills people. I'm like, something is making me question what kind of God I'm following. That's what it did then. But then when I started to make sense of the stories, one, that they could have been stories that were, representing a deeper truth, right? Then I started to open up and say, well, hold on a minute. I don't need to be a victim to what happens in the world. What I can do is decide how I interpret what happens in the world. I can, in my reality, whether society says it's good or bad, how can I look at this and say this is ultimately for my good, right? So it's taking that benevolent God and saying this is benevolent. If I'm here, this creation is benevolent, and this benevolence is inside of me. So how could I use this for my good and not ever set myself in a place where I'm a victim to circumstance instead of powerful creator creating my reality?
Do you think that by deciding how we're going to look at something, how we're going to frame it, changes the reality of it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because we do create our reality. The way we're going to frame something, whether it be a driver that cuts us off, right, in traffic, or the way we're going to frame, let's call it Jesus dying on the cross. The way we frame those things determines how we believe, and then therefore, because our beliefs determine how we're going to act, that becomes all the universal energy, all the law of attraction, the way that works. We're attracting that same kind of victimization to us. If we're going to be victims, then that's what we're going to be. But if we're going to be powerful creators, all of a sudden, I'm able to look from a different perspective and say, this may be good. And, you know, I have the benefit now of living 60 years, and I found the things that I was a victim to for the longest time were actually some of the things that served me the best.
Do you think that we have, and we're about out of time in this segment, but do you think that the past way that we framed most all religions has put us into a victim stance?
Absolutely. I mean, how could it not?
So if we're looking at the way we framed religion historically as putting us in the victim stance, and yet we're looking at transmuting that in some way to empower us, how do you make that giant leap?
I think you get to know your religious sources, your books, the people that were lifted up in that, the saints. You look at what they said and what they did and how they gained perspective on that, and then you really look at the Jesus story, the Christ story itself, right? Not the idea of what is that Christ energy? Why is that still in this world, right? And why can we discern that? So I think it's a matter of really saying, I want to know, how do I work best in this world? And how does my world work best for me?
Well, we're just about to go into the break, but what I'd like to talk about on the other side is some examples of how that's shown up in your life, if you don't mind.
All right. I will do that.
We can get into that. Okay. But for now, Dean and I will return very shortly. Don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Is seeing believing, or do you have to believe to see? With us this hour discussing the power of faith is Dean Wilkinson. Dean, we were just about to talk about some examples. Now, the way we've been talking so far, it sounds like you don't believe in religion or a higher source. Is that the case? And give me some examples of how reframing the way you look at it changes what happens.
I believe in a higher source, and I call it God. Okay, so that's what I'm most comfortable calling it God, but I also recognize that people call it different things, right? So that source, where I came from, what is the animating spirit in me? What drives me? To me, that's that source. And it's also what drives you, and in my perspective, and everybody else on the planet. There is some animating energy, value there that we may or may not make sense of, or we may have had it educated or miseducated out of us, but it doesn't leave you alone. So I would say I definitely say there is that higher power, and it's us. And you're coming here, believing is seeing, right? Or is seeing believing. It is, it's a little bit of both, but in a sense, whenever I started to understand that my views and my perspective was it was very limited in that Christian perspective. It's very limited. And until I started I paid attention to that animating energy inside of me and followed it and said, what is trying to be said here? And that started to change what I saw. So
you're talking about the animating energy within you. How do you have a conversation with that? How does that show up?
Well, commonly it's called the voice in the head, right? It's that, but it's not as egoic as the voice in the head. So when I look at that animating energy, and I don't know if I've ever called it that before, just today, just to let you know, but it's that. Well, let me just tell you a quick story. I was having problems. This was 2002. I was having problems with my son. He was getting in all kinds of trouble. He was fighting with his sister, fighting with his mom, getting kicked out of school at its 9 or 10-year-old, right? It was one of those deals. And we had said, teacher said, you need to get him tested for ADHD. And so we did. We got him tested, and the psychologist comes out and said, wow, of all the kids I've tested, this kid is in the 97th percentile of this being affecting his life. And it was such a relief for me and his mom at the time. And I was going on a trip, and I was driving down Interstate 95 in the United States. And I was really questioning why I loved my son so much. He has done nothing but rebel. He has done nothing but fight. He has done nothing but cause problems, in a sense. Why do I love him so much? Because I had grown up where I needed to perform well and obey the rules to be loved. And in that moment, I heard or felt something say, well, that's how I feel about you. And I immediately, it was so strong, I immediately turned to my right to see if anybody was in the passenger seat, right? And I was like, so you don't care? No, I don't care. And I ended up having a short conversation, because the conversation with this voice isn't like the voice in your head. It's very short, very to the point, is what I've noticed. And so I've learned to cultivate that relationship, learn to listen, and because I followed this, God doesn't care. God doesn't care if I misbehave. God doesn't care if I smoke or have a drink. God doesn't care if my business succeeds. God, what? And that blew my world up, right? That blew everything up. So then I, reading the Bible through that, and the whole Christian message and everything else was, it sure enough even says it in there that God doesn't care. So I had to believe that I had heard that. Then I started seeing it was right in the material that I'd been reading before.
So you're not saying then that you don't believe in God or the scriptures, but it's the interpretation that's being passed down that you're having difficulty with?
That most people have difficulty with. I don't anymore, right? I did have for a long time. I ended up leaving Christianity and, getting into meditation and, hey, all you hard workers out there and all you men, real men, watch Oprah, because I got introduced to Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and Tony Robbins through it was new material, but stuff I wouldn't have opened up to in the religious world. So
did you have a crisis of faith during this time? I mean, you're moving from a dogmatic, way of looking at things to all of a sudden having to reconcile that it's not working in life, to reevaluating. Was there a crisis of faith going on there?
Absolutely. I mean, when I think about that time, right, it was very emotional, because I had centered my whole way the world works is this way, the way I've been told it's worked, the way it was framed. And all of a sudden, when I saw that wasn't working, I stepped out of my leadership position at church and didn't know why, but I started to explore. And oh my gosh, I tried on atheism for a while. I tried on Buddhism for a while. I kept that exploration going, right, for the next 10 years of what is it? But everything was a crisis of faith until I started to, aggregate the beliefs that made sense to me, that now I don't have that crisis of faith. Now I walk in a sense of peace and joy and clarity that I never had before inside of religion.
So what kind of a leader were you in your church?
In church, I was above the pastor. I was the chairman of the board, is the way our church was structured. And I did counseling, teaching, small groups, built them, ministry, the whole thing. I was essentially an unpaid pastor. So
it sounds to me like you also had a crisis of identity, yes?
Oh yeah, right. What do I do now, right? Like that, and that's where Epoch Work actually starts to come, starts to form, because what do I do now with all these skills that I've, spent 10 years of my life developing, and leadership skills and teaching skills and counseling skills and connecting skills? What do I do now? And yeah, I was lost. I was lost for a good 9 months to a year that I just didn't know which way to go.
So at this point, have you made a composite of all the things that you've studied and come up with a third option, basically?
I have. I have. It's centered ultimately in the Bible, right? The Beatitudes of Jesus, to me, are a roadmap to the human evolution, to how we go from, what we're doing here to having the knowledge and the wisdom to make sense of the world and to make a difference in the world. And how, I started seeing pieces of these during that time I was at church, but I didn't have the perspectives to open up to what they really meant. But when I started seeing the influences of Jesus and the time and all the teachings that he would have been exposed to, from Egypt to China to the Far East, all of it was, oh wow! I started to put pieces of all these things together, and then I had to reconcile. Hold it, if I was in marriage counseling at the time, and our counselor, Christian counselor too, at that said, I was probably complaining about something, and she said, well, what if you chose this? What if you chose this life? And that set me back, Gwilda. I mean, what if I did? What if I did?
What was I thinking?
Yeah. Well, then it was also that, but it moved me from ever being a victim again. Okay.
So do you believe that Jesus was ever really alive, that he ever really walked the earth?
I'm going to tell you that I don't know the answer to that. I wrote a foreword to a book that he insists that he never was, but Jesus is such a hero to me, right? And the character of Jesus was such a guiding light to me that I can't say he didn't exist, because now he's existing. He's existing in my world, in my mind. So how I interpreted what he was doing and how he was living his life was the guide. So did he exist? To me, he existed, but he doesn't have to exist for you, and it's okay, right? It's that kind of thing. So absolutely a guiding force. But now I look at that energy that I talked about earlier as Christ, as the Christ spirit that has been talked about outside of Christianity forever and inside of Christianity. And that's the animating force that is, I think, in every human being.
So is are you saying that each religion is simply an archetypal form of the spirit of how we're supposed to act in the world?
I don't want to say I'm going to say for sure, but because I don't know every single religion in the depths of it. But here's what I do know, that with the ones that I looked at, they all point the same way, and that's that inner reality is here. It's inside of us. The kingdom of heaven is within. That idea. They all seem to be pointing that way. And
what does that mean, Dean? What does that mean, that it's within?
That we create our reality. It's the kingdom of heaven, the place we want to live, the powerful, clear, prosperous, effective, giving place that we want to live happens in here before it ever gets out in the world, right? And that's what I saw in the Beatitudes. I've started seeing patterns. I'm a pattern guy. I see all kinds of patterns, but this one took me a while because I had a lot to unlearn here. But now I can say that the first three Beatitudes, for instance, are a way of thinking. The next three are a way of doing, and the next three are the way of being. And it's inside of that we learn, we try, we look at problems as opportunities. We look at situations as, why would I have created this? If I chose this life, why would I have chosen to go through this? Right. So I don't know if that answers the question. So
did your stance become, you say God doesn't give a hang, okay? Did your stance become that we're given this life and God doesn't care how we live it?
That's what I came to. He doesn't care how we live it, but how we live it will determine the next life. And I'm not saying karma necessarily is, all the elements of that, but in a sense, yeah, okay. how we live this life, if we chose this life, how we live this is going to be a part of next life. It's going to build one upon the other, just like these Beatitudes do. And I think, like just like the seed does, growing roots before it grows fruits. There is some kind of cyclical, in my opinion, a cyclical evolutionary.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are going to have to take a station break. We'll pick up on the other side of this.
Okay.
Dean and I will be right back to continue our discussion, so stay right there.
Thank you.
This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Can one really fake it until they make it, or are they just living a lie? With us this hour to delve into such questions is Dean Wilkinson. His website, epochwork.com. Dean, there is a good question. So we're talking about manifestation and belief, okay? And so one of the premises is if you believe it first, then it'll manifest. Is that where we're going with this?
So, as I started to explore and apply, right, the law of attraction or manifestation as it's most popularly taught, I started noticing who it worked for and who it didn't. And then for myself, I started being aware that, hey, I couldn't just speak it into existence. I had to actually, there was something else going on, right? There was some more to this. And here's how I think I come to this. One of my, it's my life motto, live like it's true. So whatever you believe whatever you want, but live like it's true to see if it works, right? So in manifestation, just saying it isn't going to do it. But when I align my thoughts, my words, and my actions together, and they are in alignment to universal principles that have always been in existence, I can manifest what I want to.
So the universal principles that have always been in existence, where do we find them?
Woo! Okay. I could just start throwing, you can see them. I see them in the Beatitudes, right? But that's, I call that the epic way now. But where I found them was in leadership books. I found them in the Bible. I found them in the parables of the seed. I found them, or the farmer, or the pearl of great price. You reap what you sow. Those kind of principles are out there, and it's just the way the world is designed to work. That's the way the Creator obviously made things to happen. You could say they're scientific.
So you're saying we can look at the way nature works and it's there as well?
Oh, absolutely. To me, I think it's the magic, right? I think nature is the magic that is screaming at us to pay attention to me because I'm showing you the way to life, an abundant life.
So if we go backwards to the principles you're saying, okay, we can say it, we can try to believe it, because quite frankly, it's a trying, isn't it? Mm-hmm. when what we've seen so far and been taught so far is that doesn't work that way. That's magical thinking. So we have to try to believe it. We can say it, but then we have to take action. Am I correct so far? Okay. So how do we figure out what action we're supposed to take?
So to me, this, before we can say it or try to believe it, let's align what we want, right, and our expectations. If I want a jet plane, for instance, and I want it to materialize on the tarmac for me, and it's not going to happen. But if I want a jet plane, that means I probably need to have a lot of extra income. So that means I need to probably learn how to sell so I can start a business where I can sell a product and make a lot of extra income. Then I need to get people involved so they can sell for me, so I'm not the one producing all the money and the revenue, so that we can make more money. And then I got to gather more people so we can support all that to deliver to my customers. So now I'm serving others. And then if I do that well enough, then I might one day have a plane on the tarmac.
So from what you've just designed, it started out with deciding what you want. But it's been my experience that most people, myself included, for the most part, have no real clue what they want. What they think they want is actually creating solutions to an assumed problem. So my question to you is, Dean, how do you figure out what you want in the first place so you're not chasing your tail?
Well, I've been wrestling that question for 2 years as I came into the newest business that I was consulting, and I sat down with everybody. I said, "What do you want?" And they didn't know. And I was like, "What? How do you not know what you want? I mean, how about what do you want for tomorrow?" Right? And some of them didn't know that. I'm like, "Wow." So I started to realize, oh, we don't know what we want. So what is it that we do want? And I started looking at society first, but then humanity as a whole. And I looked at what are the common denominators here about what everybody wants. I saw that everybody wants freedom, everybody wants prosperity, everybody wants peace of mind and joy and happiness, right? So that gave me a common denominator of, okay, so we all want that. And so for, that airplane that I just talked about, threw up an example on the tarmac. So that might give me freedom, the freedom that I desire or I need to accomplish my purpose in the world. So I think it's our work on a daily basis is the vehicle that we start whittling away all the pieces of our ego or our misconceptions to start really realizing what is our true purpose in the world, and realizing that it's probably to serve others, or it's going to be service of the self. So serving others or serving self.
Can it be both? Isn't that the balance, really?
It is a balance, right? But what am I doing? I can inspire someone to do some work for me, or I can manipulate them to do the work, right? Which one is better? Which one is better for the humanity as a whole? Which one gets all of us evolving at the same pace to the same place, so that we do have that peace on earth, or at least the peace and prosperity and peace of mind that I want inside myself, because that's my reality.
It seems like, I'm glad you brought up manipulation, because I think a lot of us are unconscious of the way we manipulate others in the world in order to get our needs met, because based on our damage and things that we don't necessarily remember. So how can you first uncover the manipulation that you might be doing so that you can come from a more straightforward place?
This may be personality driven on how to do that. I know that myself, that before it became this animating energy that I talked about earlier, it was my conscious. It was, man, I'm saying this and I don't really believe it about this person. Or so, manipulation almost requires another person to be in front of you.
But Dean, how much of your conscience was based on the Christian upbringing?
All of it at that time. I mean, it's the only answer I had to how the world works, right? So it was all there, and I did manipulate the crap out of people.
So did you have to give up your conscience to see that?
No, I had to align my conscience to love, to these universal principles that I talked about. I just had to align that to, oh, hold on a minute. If I know that you've stated to me what you want to do or what your goal is, and it's in alignment to what mine is, and we're here together in this moment. So we've both chosen this now. We have both chosen this. So how do we align our efforts and our desires to this one thing, and both of us get what we want along the way?
It sounds like you must have had some kind of a very epic, if you don't mind my using the word, thing happen to you or come along in your life to shift you out of that manipulation place. It was probably working quite well for you, thank you, into a win-win. And what was it?
So my cousin and I had started a business, and it was in the garage door industry, and we just stumbled on it. We weren't that brilliant, but we stumbled upon this way to do the garage door business that everybody wanted to buy. So we started franchising that. And our first attempt at it failed because we got in a lawsuit with some people that were trying to copy it. So we had to disband and redo that. And in that rebanding, all the ownership, the first one was all under me. The second one was under my cousin, under his control, but it was no big deal. We were building the same thing. Well, a few years into that, after it got successful, I found myself at a board meeting getting kicked off the board and losing my stock. And it wasn't this was a $400 million business that all of a sudden I had nothing. And that wasn't the hardest part, because I had looked at myself as a survivor and, build myself up to thrive. I'll just build another one. But what happened was that betrayal, that hurt that came from who I consider my best friend, and who was not spiritual, who was not Christian, at the time. He was, I don't believe in that. All I know is I'm manipulating the crap out of everybody. I'm telling them how to live, tell them what I want to do. It turned my world upside down, Gwilda. I mean, way upside down. And for 7 years, all I did was start another business and let it run, and it helped me survive, and my family survived. But that's just where I went into that search. How is this world supposed to work? God, does this Bible say it is? So I'm going to read that Bible. I'm going to understand what it says, if that's the answers. But when I found that truth in there, but also lacking of how to make sense of it, I started exploring other things. But it was one of those that just, all of a sudden you're free falling. You've reached the end of your rope and you've let go. And what do you do now?
So you followed all the rules and not got the outcome that you thought you deserved.
Right. And I was mad. I was mad as a hornet. And I cussed God. And, my wife at the time said, he's going to strike our house with lightning. Right. I'm like, no, I was so mad. But it was also the best thing that ever happened to me, because I'd have been an a-hole if I'd have kept going the route I was going.
So you got a dose of your own medicine. Is that what?
A dose of my own medicine. I was manipulated to the place where I didn't even know it.
So have you since then still have to ride yourself, because it's such an ingrained part of our whole society? Do you still find you have to monitor yourself to find the deeper places that you still are manipulating and not coming from a straight place? As the natives would say, not walking straight.
Well, because I have this life model of live like it's true, right? It's there. But I'm always examining. That's my, my review of the day, or my intention in the morning is to set out a place where, when I'm serving others today, when I'm serving my purpose today, let me do it in love. Let me do it in caring. Let me do it in the way this person will respond to that. But yes, I have to watch it. I have to, because it doesn't go away, the desire, the shortcut that it is to manipulate somebody.
Boy, isn't that the truth? And like I said, it's the currency of our society right now, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And
So
it makes it difficult to teach too, because our society is lacking trust, and almost everyone is lacking that trust. And what can we do as people who have these perspectives and have these higher perspectives to help everyone evolve? And that's what you're doing, and it's what I'm doing with Epoch Work too. Just let's help. Let's pitch in.
let's make a change.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's that time for another commercial break. Please stay with us as Dean and I continue to explore the importance of faith in manifestation. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Is all faith created equal? If not, whose God is the real God? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dean Wilkinson. Dean, that's the question of this quarter, of this segment. Whose God is the real God? Because there have been wars for eons over that very topic, and yet you've kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything to come back to find something you can believe in. So whose God's the real God? How do we find the real God?
Well, I'm going to be a little trite here at the beginning and say your God is the real God to you. It's your reality. So the way you perceive God is going to affect your reality. But beyond that, beyond that trite answer, the way you know that your God and your belief about God is true is it works. It works to bring about what in the Bible is called the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. So if it's working, it's your God is true to you. And if it's not hurting other people, right? If it's not hurting you and yourself, right? And I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about your sense of peace and your sense of prosperity and freedom, that your sense of being able to do that.
Do you see God as a formula of behaviors?
Oh no, I don't. I wish we had more words, right? I wish the English language had more words because the way to we're trying to describe something indescribable in words, and we're not. I keep trying, and I bet you've attempted to many times yourself, and a lot of people have attempted to. But the words are going to have gaps in them to do that. So there is no one God except the God that set all this in motion. What set the galaxies in place? What are we seeing now with that James Webb telescope that we're seeing more and more galaxies? What set that in motion? What puts the seed in motion, right? All we got to do is put it in the ground, then it goes to work, right? What is doing that?
So what I'm hearing you say is that the divinations of God that have created the different that are represented in the different religions are actually our translation point for what's running the cosmos?
I believe so. I believe that's what our ancient scriptures are showing us, right? They didn't have the scientific language and the psychological language that we have today. And so I think what they were wanting to pass on to generations to help the world evolve was they're using their language and their understanding to communicate that this is there. What is this force that would shoot lightning bolts out of the sky, that hung the moon in place, and the sun would rise and fall every day? They were trying to explain that in the best language they had. But remember, they didn't know about the galaxies and it took a long time. So we've got to realize the perspective that those are written from, and not hang everything on them. Go ahead.
Don't you think that we're equally as ignorant today? I mean, we're pretty full of ourselves. We think we've got it all figured out, right? But aren't we as archaic and ignorant in our own way?
Yeah.
And if so, how do we work beyond that in order to conceive of and cooperate with the ultimate powers?
That reminds me of one of my favorite Christian teachers. He said, we're all going to die one day, and found out how terribly wrong we all were, right? So it reminds me of that statement. And but we're not going to figure this out. We're all going to be surprised. But I'll tell you what works. What works is that if what I'm doing is working in my life to bring about those things I mentioned earlier, the peace, the joy, the love, if that's what I'm going to take into the next life. And so if I realize that if I chose this life and I'm living this life with that intention to evolve my soul, the thing that keeps on moving, keeps on going through these times, then when I get into the next life, I'm going to have not only surprises, but I'm going to have understandings. I'm going to have a bigger perspective. I'm going to be able to tap into a different reality, and I'm depending upon that being true. Of course, no one knows. I don't know if I came where I was before this, right? I don't know for sure. And I don't know where I'm going after this life. I know I was born and I will die in this life.
Those are the ones things that are pretty much guaranteed, aren't they?
Pretty much guaranteed. So I frame those in ways that work for me in this life.
Do you think that the truth and our concept of God is a moving target, in that we were just talking about how our views have evolved from where they were when the scriptures were written? Our societies, well, maybe evolved, maybe devolved, I'm not sure, but things have changed. So what our way of applying spiritual truths, has that changed as well? And does it need to continue to change?
So I do think it's changed, and it does continue to need to change. Let's never set. Let's all, whoever's listening to this, let's never ground our feet in one place anymore about the idea of God and our Creator. It won't serve you. It hasn't served the world ever. So why would it start to serve us? So let's make that. Let's go ahead and move with our understanding. Move with our words and our language and our scientific discoveries, and help those inform our future concepts of God.
Is the key in leaving our concept open enough that new information doesn't put us in a crisis of faith every time?
Yeah, it is that, the epic way and the first beatitude, in my opinion, you get the idea of repent, right? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is here, right? The repent is open up to a new possibility, because what you're looking at isn't what it's going to work. What you're looking for is already here. And so it's this idea of opening up to new possibilities and staying open. Stay open in your belief about God, and the way you work, the way you live, the way you love, the way you interact with other people. Stay open. Don't judge other people. Don't decide because that person acted that way, that's who they really are, because they've got the same creative force in them that you and I have in us.
So it's time in the show, Dean, when I have to ask you, what is your mission?
My mission is taking this message to blue collar workers that have been sort of minimized in the education and the message of this. The blue collar worker, who is just as creative as any of the most creative people in the world, that man or woman that has not had access to all these different perspectives and the time that I was so blessed with. That 7 years of mourning that I was in and doing the discovery, who gets that, right? I hardly ever had to go to work because my business was just running. Who gets all that time to go discover this stuff? So my mission is to help the world evolve by helping the blue collar or tradesperson evolve.
So if we are trying to follow the things that you and I have been talking about for the past hour, and we find it's just not working for us, how do you backtrack and figure out where you got off track?
Well, maybe we got off track, right? With, look at where you got your beliefs from, right? That's what this thing is about. Where did you choose your belief, or were they chosen for you? And sort of just you by osmosis, you took them in because there was no other choice. And today we have no excuse of that with the internet and YouTube and all the ways we have access to information. We don't have to be stuck. So whenever you get confused, the last thing that you weren't confused about, go listen to it again. Go listen to that person again. Go read that book again, because it will point you back to where you were solid. And because I think the world is evolving, so is our beliefs about life and the creator are evolving. I think you start to hear and get hints of other things that will take you even further and start to make more sense.
So what part does personal intention and clear intention play in evolving our belief and in manifesting?
Well, intention, might be like it's the will, right? It's the thy will be done, right? To me, it is. I need, and it goes back to what you said earlier, right? On that, how do we know what we want? Well, we can't have a clear intention unless we know what we want. I think paying attention to where these beliefs came from, where there's dissonance, where there's not harmony inside of you, in your spirit, in your mind, where you're not able to stop the voice in your head. Pay attention right there, because that's a gift. Quit looking at it as something that's bad and you got to fix. Go sit in it.
So, Dean,
feel it.
Again, we've been speaking for about an hour here on an approach that you're offering. What makes that different than the religions that we've been given to nauseam? How's that different?
So religion tells you what to do. And this is different by you go decide what to do. You go find peace of mind for yourself. You go find tranquility. You go find equanimity. You go find joy. Find those things that bring that. Not momentary happiness. That's different. Find the things that bring you joy.
And where do we look?
And I'm saying look in the great spiritual texts. Look here, at programs like this. Look at the internet. Go search it. Go search your question. Find out your question. Type it in. Refine your question, because the better you refine your question, the easier it's going to be to find what you're looking for on this inside out journey that we're all on. And I can't point anybody to one specific place, Gwilda, because that would be out of alignment to what I believe, that I believe that life itself is showing us individually what it's doing when we stop and pay attention.
It is a time of changing our perspective and looking to ourselves for answers, is it not?
It is. It is.
Well, Dean, we're just about out of time. Tell us real quickly where people can find out about your work and about your book.
Well, epicwork.com, and, EPOCH work, epic is a moment in time where your life, takes a different meaning, takes a different path. And so epicwork.com/contact, you can reach out for something there. Just put in the comments you would like to understand more about this or talk more.
Okay.
And, of course, we're on Instagram too, and the social media sites. But
unfortunately, we are out of time. But
Okay.
Dean, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Gwilda. I appreciate it.
Our guest this hour has been Epoch Work founder Dean Wilkinson. His website, epochwork.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.